Okay, so the title of my sermon today is Christmas Pagan? And you wonder, why do we even have to ask that question nowadays? Well, it is because it's nowadays. We have all sorts of different strange doctrines. Like, it seems like every week somebody's come up with a strange doctrine. And so, is Christmas pagan? Is it something we should even celebrate? And I think we saw here in Luke chapter 2, starting in verse 13, that the announcement of Jesus' birth was a big deal. In verse 13 it says, "And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, 'Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.' And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said one to another, 'Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which has come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us.' And they came with haste, found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger." So it was big enough that God sent a big company of angels to announce the birth of His Son, Jesus Christ. So you think, well, Christmas being pagan, that's maybe something that just a very few people believe, and I think it is just a few people, but it's surprising how many people. I got people in my extended family that think this, and obviously they're wrong. So I found a website that had 120 reasons against Christmas. And most of them, even in their twisted logic, didn't make sense. It was basically, you shouldn't worship false gods and you should follow God. Amen. You should do that. What does that have to do with celebrating Christmas? So this isn't really in any particular order. It's just kind of how I sorted them out. They sorted them into a few different categories. The number one is Christmas trees. Okay? Bringing a tree into your house and decorating it. Is there something wrong with that? Well, first of all, we don't have a Christmas tree at home. But it's not because I think it's wrong. It's just because we didn't grow up with that. That wasn't something we did in our family growing up. We just didn't do that. So, do I believe you shouldn't have trees? Well, I don't care. If that's a tradition you have, go for it. I don't really care if people have trees or not. That's just something we didn't grow up with. But the one thing that people bring up is Jeremiah chapter 10. You can turn there in your Bibles. Jeremiah chapter 10, they say, see, this is something we shouldn't do. It's basically they're saying it's worshiping these trees, and that's something that we shouldn't do. So Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 1, it says, "Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold, they fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not." So see right there, Christmas trees. You got the tree, you're bringing it inside. Well, actually, I don't think it even says they bring it inside. They just cut it, and they deck it with silver and with gold. So, for one thing, decking it doesn't mean that you're putting ornaments on it. To deck something, when you deck a trailer, you're putting a floor on your trailer. In German, to deck something, and I'm not using the right word, that's to put a lid on it. So, what they're doing is decking it, is actually covering it. And we see, if they would just keep reading, like if people would get the verses in context instead of taking them out of context, they would see what the verse would mean. We can drop down to verse 8. "But they are altogether brutish and foolish. The stock is a doctrine of vanities. Silver spread into plates is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz. The work of the workmen, and of the hands of the founder, blue and purple is their clothing. They are all the work of cunning men." Verse 10. Actually, we'll stop there. We see there that they spread the silver into plates. And so it's just a thin silver. And actually, if we back up to verse number 5, I think maybe I skipped that. It says, "They are upright as a palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good, for as much as there is none like unto thee, O Lord, thou art great, and thy name is great in might." So we see here it's talking about idols. It's saying they're upright as the palm tree, but they speak not. They're idols that these people are making. They're taking a tree, they're covering it, they're decking it with silver, and they're making it an idol. But he's saying they can't speak, they need to be born. So that means somebody has to carry them because they cannot go by themselves. It says they cannot go. It says they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. So this is idolatry. You carve a tree, you plate it with silver or with gold. It's something that these people were bowing down to, and that's obviously something we shouldn't do. But if somebody brings a tree into their house and puts some ornaments on there, that's not necessarily evil, and they're definitely not bowing down to it, or in most cases. So that's one of the objections they have with celebrating Christmas. And some of the things they bring up here is kind of weird, but I kind of picked some of them. Like they use Deuteronomy 12:1-4 to say the Lord condemns doing anything under green trees in his worship. So you're not supposed to do anything under a tree. It's pretty weird. Deuteronomy 12:1 says, "These are the statutes and judgments which you shall observe to do in the land which the Lord God of thy fathers giveth thee to possess it, all the days that you live upon the earth. You shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations which ye shall possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains, upon the hills, and under every green tree." See, there's that green tree again. "You shall overthrow their altars and break their pillars, and burn their groves with fire, and you shall hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the names out of that place. You shall not do so unto the Lord your God." So they bring up this passage about people committing bad things. They're worshiping false gods under the trees. But it's not the trees themselves that is the problem. Because it's pretty silly to say you shouldn't do anything under a tree. If you go to Genesis chapter 18, I'm going to go there myself, we'll see that there's nothing wrong with being under a tree. And I don't think all of them believe this. Is just this one website I was at, he was saying, with doing anything under green trees, which is like totally ridiculous. And a quick look in the Bible here can debunk that fairly quickly. Genesis 18, let's look at verse 4. And this is Abraham talking to the 3 visitors he has, and if you study this in its entirety, you see one of the visitors was God. And it says here in verse 4, "Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree." So Abraham's telling them, I'm going to get some water, and you guys can rest underneath the tree, probably for shade. In verse 8, "And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat." So they're eating under a tree. So that's just absolutely ludicrous, ridiculous to say that you shouldn't do anything under a tree. And I'm not saying all these people that say Christmas is pagan are saying that, but this case, this guy is bringing this up. And then they keep going. The Lord hates religion that goes under green trees. And then they bring up a couple of verses. And yes, there's bad things that were done under green trees. But that doesn't mean you can go cut down all the trees in the world. It just doesn't make sense. One of them they bring up is 1 Kings 14:23. "But they also built them high places and images and groves on every high hill and under every green tree." So there's bad things that happen there. There's idolatry. Jeremiah 3:6, "The Lord said also unto me in the days of Josiah the king, Hast thou seen that which backsliding Israel hath done? She has gone up upon every high mountain and under every green tree, and there hath played the harlot." So something different, something playing the harlot under a tree. So according to them, I guess we should just go and cut down all the trees and then burn them to ashes. So if you have trees where some heathen are worshiping false gods, go ahead and cut it down. Or with other wicked things that are happening, that if it bothers you, go and cut it down. In fact, there's a place in California, it's called a Bohemian Grove. If they level that would be good by me. But if you don't like trees, go ahead, cut them all yours down, just leave mine alone. I had a neighbor that ripped up the trees between our properties, and they were his trees, so he was welcome to do it. But just because they weren't all the same height. And I guess, in nature, how often do you get everything growing perfectly one height? It doesn't happen that often. It's kind of silly. So the people will say, well, the problem isn't with the trees being outside, it's with bringing them inside. Well, what makes it pagan? So if you would turn to Nehemiah chapter 8. While you're going through there, I'll read for you from Isaiah 60, verse 13. It says, "The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I'll make the place of my feet glorious." So it's talking about a fir tree and a pine tree. Those are evergreen trees. And the box tree, I don't know what tree that's talking about. Who knows, maybe a box elder, but it might be a different one. And it says to beautify the place of my sanctuary. So if they're bringing trees into their sanctuary to make it more pleasing to the eye, then what should be wrong with somebody bringing it into the house? Now you might say, well, this might not be the tree itself. This might be just the wood. You might be right. There in Nehemiah 8, verse 15, says, "And that they should publish and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, Go forth unto the mount and fetch olive branches and pine branches and myrtle branches and palm branches and branches of thick trees to make booths, as it is written." So the people went forth and brought them and made themselves booths, every one upon the roof of his house, and in their courts, and in the courts of the house of God, and in the street of the water gate, and in the street of the gate of Ephraim. So they're bringing greenery on the roofs and in their courts, but also notice in verse 60 it says in the courts of the house of God. They're bringing branches, green branches, and they're making themselves little booths or little shelters to. This was for a certain feast that they did this. Psalm 52 verse 8 says, "But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the mercy of God forever." There's some mentions of trees in the house of God, and some of these are just figurative and symbolic. Psalm 92:12, "The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those that be planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God." And one other place, and this isn't actual trees, this is just pictures of trees. Ezekiel 40:37 says, "And the posts thereof were toward the outer court, and palm trees were upon the posts thereof, on this side and on that side, and the going up to it had 8 steps." So here there are posts, and there are pictures of palm trees on the posts. Okay, so and the temple had all sorts of, they have pomegranates and palm trees and different things that were engraved on the walls and different parts of the temple. So I don't want to make too big a deal about this tree thing. Really, I couldn't care less if people have a tree or not. I won't. I mean, if somebody in my family wants to have it someday, I'm not saying I will never do it, but it just isn't that big a deal to me. But to say that we shouldn't worship Christmas because some people bring Christmas trees into their house, even if you don't agree with what I read here, and you think that it's wrong to bring a Christmas tree in your house, why would you not celebrate Christmas just because somebody's doing it wrong according to your opinion? Next thing a lot of people will bring up is Santa Claus. And I agree, Santa Claus, that's ridiculous. They say Santa Claus is a pagan mockery of God the Father with white hair, grandfatherly image, eternal, lives in the north, unlimited resources, omniscient of children's behavior, omnipresent for a night, hears confessions, comes as a thief, blesses children, distributes judgments for works. I agree. First of all, you're lying to your children if you're telling them Santa Claus. The other thing is, it teaches a false God and a works-based salvation. Here's this person that can see what you're doing, knows whether you've been good or bad, and he's going to reward you. He's going to give you a present depending if you've been good or bad. It just sounds like a false religion. And obviously, I know people don't put a lot of weight on it in all cases, but it's just because, again, if somebody else is doing it wrong according to us, doesn't mean we shouldn't celebrate the birth of Christ at all. We shouldn't throw the baby with the bathwater. And I agree, we shouldn't lie to our children. Or they'll say, well, the little drummer boy did not travel to the manger to play his drum for the infant Jesus. Well, we don't read anything about that in the Bible. It's a made-up story. So, again, if somebody believes something wrong, doesn't mean we have to not celebrate Christmas. And I already talked about not lying to your children. So the gospel, according to Christmas tradition, cards and plays corrupt the Bible facts. But yeah, there is a lot of that. Catholics and other religions, they corrupt all kinds of doctrines from the Bible. Does that mean we throw out the whole Bible just because somebody else believes wrong about it? No, we don't. Because just because some Catholics made up a story about this Saint Nicholas, doesn't mean we should throw out the whole idea of celebrating Christmas. I mean, Catholics get baptism wrong, and communion wrong, and almost everything wrong. Does that mean just because they name the name of Christ that we shouldn't serve Christ? Obviously not. Well, some people say, well, it's on the wrong date. It's not on December 25th. Okay, now if that really bothers you, you got other issues that you got to work out. But does it really matter? There's 1 in a 365 chance that it is on the right date. And I think it's even better chance than that, but we'll get to that a little bit later. They say Jesus was not born in December, for 1/2 year back from Passover is rather October. Jesus was not born in December, for shepherds did not stay in the fields during winter. I did a little bit of research on this, not from a religious site. I looked up raising sheep in Israel. Okay? And there's an article, I'll spare you a lot of it. But it says here, the principal lambing season of Awasi ewes, so ewes I think are the female sheep, is in November, and in Lebanon, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Israel in December, January. That's the season when the sheep are having lambs. And isn't it interesting that we read the shepherds were in their flock, they're watching the sheep by night. Why are they watching them by night? Why? Yeah, they might be looking for wolves, but just like when you have cows in calving season, a lot of people that have cows that are more difficult calvers, they'll go check up on them during the night. And that might have been what they were doing in the fields there, checking up on a sheep that were about to have lambs, or the herd was in the process of having lambs. It could take multiple days or weeks or months even. But here in this article, which is not a religious source, says that the principal lambing season in Israel was December, January. And December 25th is almost in the middle of that. I'm not saying it for sure is December 25th, but this helps support that argument. So people will say, well, Jesus was not born in December, for taxation would not have been in the dead of winter. So again, they're assuming that winter, like it is here, is like how it will be in Israel. I looked up the temperature in Israel in December. It says daytime Israel temperatures are very pleasant, around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 15 to 25 Celsius. This is like, it gets cold enough that you might put on a jacket, where, you know, this is daytime, where some days you might have to put on a jacket, but otherwise you can go in your t-shirt. They say still hot, though, around the Red Sea and Dead Sea. Jerusalem will be in the 40 to 50 degree range, 5 to 10 Celsius in the evening. There will be some rain, nothing torrential. Israel winter weather fluctuates. And then I looked up a different place. Weather in Jerusalem in the winter is a little bit less predictable than in the summer. The wet season starts in November and goes through April. Every few years we're lucky enough to get a light snowfall and the whole city grinds to a halt so everyone can get out and enjoy the wonder. But most of the time it just doesn't get cold enough for snow. So here a couple of their objections is, well, they wouldn't have taxation in winter, it's in the dead of winter, it's just too cold. Or shepherds wouldn't be in the fields in winter, it's too cold. And here we hear it's hardly ever cold enough for snow, according to this article. And I don't know, I've never been to Israel, and especially not in winter. So I don't know, but according to these two different articles, it doesn't sound that cold compared to what we have here. The other thing is, the wet season starts in November. And what do you need for grazing? You need grass, and you need rain for the grass to grow. This year we didn't have as much, and a lot of people, I think, were running out of pasture, or they had to reduce their herd size to so that they wouldn't overgraze their pasture. So that adds to the idea that it could have been somewhere in the December, January range. It could have been. I'm not saying for sure it was December 25th. And I don't know why it's such a big deal to people, but for some it is. So I'll just read a bunch of these other ones that kind of go along the same line. Jesus was not born in December, for wise taxation would have been shortly after harvest. Jesus was not born in December, for careful calculation of the priest's courses excluded. That one I'll get back to. The Roman feast at the winter solstice was the sun god Mithras from the Persians. The Roman extended feast prior to the winter solstice was to Saturn, god of agriculture. Secular encyclopedias will gladly tell you that Christmas came from pagan sun worship. Emperor Aurelian picked December 25th for this holiday in 274 to worship the sun god. Pagan sun worshippers had a great festival to the sun at the winter solstice before Jesus. A couple more here. The birthday of the invincible sun, Dies Natalis Soli Invicti, and I'm obviously not pronouncing that right, was this date in Rome. December 25th was chosen by being the date of the winter solstice in the Julian calendar. So there's a few things that are going on. They're saying people are worshiping the sun. And winter solstice is when the shortest amount of daylight daylight hours are in a day. Okay. First of all, a lot of this stuff got dug up by people that didn't want to celebrate Christmas. They thought it was Catholic, and they wanted to prove it wrong. But okay, let's look at this point. He says it's the winter solstice. Well, if you look at the calendar, you'll notice that the winter solstice isn't on December 25th. Here it was December 21st. And I looked up when it would be in Israel. It said at 12:23 a.m. Saturday, December 22nd, Israel time. So it was between Friday and Saturday, just after midnight. So if it was the solstice, we're not even celebrating it on the day that the solstice is. So that I don't get that argument. But getting back to that other one about the course of Abia. Okay, so in Luke chapter 1, verse 5, it says, "There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias, of the course of Abia, and his wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth." And so we know, reading on in that story, that from Zacharias came John the Baptist. And we know that Mary came and visited Elizabeth, and it tells you approximately how far along she was. So, so these people will say, so you see, if you take the courses of the priests mentioned in 1 Chronicles 24, you see in Abijah was the 8th course. We can calculate when John the Baptist was born, and therefore Jesus was born on September 29th. Ha! Whoa there, Nelly. So you're jumping from Abijah, or Abia as it's called in the New Testament, being the 8th course, which the Bible says, it does say that Abijah was the 8th course. Okay, when David was given the courses, like the turns, they would take turns to do the duties. Abijah was the 8th one. But how do you know when Abijah that course was? You're making a lot of assumptions with that. First of all, you're assuming the courses stayed the same from David's time, and you are assuming the first ministration was from 12 to 18 Shizlut, which is December 6th to 12th, and the second ministration was from 12th to 18th Sivan, June 13th to 19th. And I should have put on like a James White Christmas sweater or something to tell you that, and tell you how smart I am and all my qualifications and all that like James White would do. But the thing is, where do you get that information? It's not in the Bible when these courses were. Well, we know from history, and we know from reading the Jewish Talmud. Really? You're going to get your information about the birth of Jesus Christ from a book that hates Jesus Christ? What kind of reasoning is that? That the Talmud says that Jesus is in hell right now, boiling in hot excrement. Like, that's blasphemous. And you're going to get your information about when Christmas is from that book? That's ridiculous. So let's examine their argument. So they say the second ministration. So there were 24 courses, right? So however long the courses was, they're saying they have to do another turn in the year. After the 24 are done, they got to start again. So they're saying the second ministration was from 12th to the 18th Sivan. So that's one of the months in the Hebrew calendar, which would work out to June 13th or 19th. And then John went, and then Zacharias went home on the 20th of Sivan because the 19th was a Sabbath, they're saying. So they got this all figured out. They're really, happy with themselves, how smart they are. And he couldn't travel that day because it's a Sabbath, right? So he had to leave on the 20th to go home. Well, first of all, they're assuming where he lived. And who knows, I didn't study this out. Maybe he lived far enough away that he couldn't travel on that day. And then they're assuming that once he got home, that they conceived John shortly thereafter. And then from that, they can calculate when Jesus is born, and it's exactly on the 15th of Tisri in the year 4 BC. Now, if you know anything about calendars, that should make you scratch your head a little bit. The year 4 BC? What does BC mean? Doesn't it mean before Christ? It maybe has some kind of Latin or different name, but to me that always means before Christ. So you're telling me that Jesus was born 4 years before Christ was born. That's ridiculous. Okay? So what does BC stand for, right? It's before Christ. So in the Bible, how do they keep track of time? The Bible is always mentioned like something like in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, or in the 3rd year, of King Asa, king of Judah. Well, when the King of Kings was born, don't you think they would have reset that calendar? We're living now, and who knows, somebody might have miscounted a year, but we're living in the 2018th year of the King of Kings, Jesus Christ. That's when the calendar got reset, when he got born. And, okay, what if it wasn't when he got born? Maybe it's a day or a month off or whatever it is. But we're soon to live in the 2019 year of King Jesus. And of course, at that time, it wasn't an earthly reign. That's going to come later. So let's say that it was the 15th of Tisri, or Tisri, however you say that. How do you know what day and month that is in the calendar that we use today? So the Hebrew calendar had 12 months of 30 days each. That's what it seems like to me. The present Hebrew calendar has 5 or 6 months with only 29 days. I looked it up. So either it's got 360 days a year, or it's got 354 or 355 like they have it today. So we know from science class that a solar year is approximately 365 and a quarter days long. So your year keeps slipping as you go if you just stay on that. So that's why a lot of these older calendars, they had to have a leap month once in a while. I've heard a couple different versions of this. They had to have 1 month every 7 years they had to add to the calendar. So the last month in the Hebrew calendar is Adar. So they had to have a second Adar. Or I've also, what I looked up here, it says they had to add, so with the ones where they only had 354 to 355 days a year, they had to add a leap month 7 times in 19 years. So it's a little bit of a complicated system. So the interesting thing, though, is, so if they say it's the 15th of Tisri, now you have a leap year. You skip ahead a month. When is Christmas next year? It's a month different than it was the year before. So if there's a calendar system like this going on, is it really that important which exact date it is? If that date can jump around a month, it just doesn't make sense. And the thing is, if it was that important, God would have told us exactly how the calendar was supposed to work in the Bible. He would have told us exactly which day to celebrate, if you have to celebrate it. Nobody says you have to celebrate it. So I found a bunch of the month names in the Bible, not all of them. And some seem to, one of them seems to have changed. So in Exodus, it's called, the first month is called Abib. Later on, in Esther 3:7, it's called Nisan. Not the truck, just Nisan. Who knows, maybe the truck was named after that, I don't know. The second month was called Ziv in 1 Kings. Now it's apparently called Iyar or something like that. The third month was Sivan in Esther 8:9. But the fourth and the fifth, I didn't find in the Bible, the fourth and fifth month. It talks about, in some of these, it talks fourth month or fifth month, but it doesn't name the name. The sixth month in Nehemiah 6:15 was Elul. The seventh month was called Ethanim in 1 Kings 8:2. 8 was called Bul with one L, B-U-L, in 1 Kings 6:38. The ninth month was called Chislu in Zechariah 7:1. The 10th month was called Tebeth in Esther 2:16. The 11th, Sebat in Zechariah 1:7. And Adar was the 12th month, and Esther 3:13 is mentioned. But there's a few of the months that the names aren't even mentioned. So if keeping track of that was so important, you'd think there'd be mentioned. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is important, because at that time, feasts were supposed to be kept. But they knew how their calendar worked at that time. We don't know exactly how it worked back then. Okay, so not only do the dates bounce back and forth, it can be they add a leap month here and a leap month there. But our calendar isn't even the same today as it was a few hundred years ago. It's changed. I don't know if you ever heard of the Julian calendar today. What the one we use today is called the Gregorian calendar. So I'll read you a short little history, of this short history, I'll just kind of highlight some points for the sake of time. But there's an article about different calendars. So it says here in this article, one of the first truly scientific calendars was the Egyptian calendar. According to this calendar, a year comprised of 12 months, and each month had exactly 30 days. That sounds exactly like the kind of calendar that we read about in the Bible. Later on, the Babylonian calendar was developed, and it was a lunar-solar calendar. That means it relied on the moon and the sun. The years of this calendar were made up of 12 lunar months, and each month would begin when a new crescent month appeared. The Greeks also used a calendar similar to that. But they also had other calendars, such as the democratic state calendar with 10 arbitrary months and an agricultural calendar. The first Roman calendar was created by Romulus, and it had 10 months in a year, with each month lasting 30 or 31 days. So there are 300 or 310 days in a year. And especially, one of the things you got to remember is when one king's term ended, it was sometimes violently. The new king might not have started or kept track exactly of what the old system was. So you might be off years even in the calendar. So, and the Romans had a number of calendars, and the most notable one was the Julian calendar. Okay, so that's the one that was before the calendar we have now. And in studying this, is interesting. Some of the Roman people, and probably in other empires in the world too, they would actually hold off on the leap month or on changing the year, different things like that. They would mess with the calendar just so that they could be in office longer, or the opponent would get out of office sooner. That wouldn't be the first time that the politicians have messed with things. I think that still happens today. So the Julian calendar. So it was introduced in 45 BC by Julius Caesar. So according to this, for what it's worth, this might have been the calendar they used when Jesus was around. So although it had 12 months, many of the months were shorter than the months in the modern calendar. As such, one Julian year only consisted of 355 days, but he made some changes later. So before Julius Caesar's reforms, the year began on the 31st of March. A leap month with 23 or 24 days was also created to keep the calendar properly aligned with the cycle of seasons. And later on it says here, Caesar introduced leap year rule, which stated that all leap years can be evenly divided by 4. Okay, so that's the Julian calendar. So that's where they started the every 4 years that you add a leap day. So the Gregorian calendar. So there's a pope named Pope Gregory the 13th, or at least that's what they named him. I don't know if that's what his mom called him, but in the year 1582, he decreed that there should be a change in the Julian calendar. And the Pope had a lot of power throughout history, in certain parts of history. So, and it was a theoretical calendar, and had very precise calculations of vernal equinoxes and whatever different things that he decided to take into account. But so he decreed this. The thing is, many European countries did not adopt the Gregorian calendar when it was introduced. They looked at it as a Catholic plot. They thought, they're trying to mess with us. They're trying to... In fact, in the places that it was adopted, Thursday the 4th, October 1582, was immediately followed by Friday the 15th, October 1582, with 10 days skipped. And there was a lot of people that were upset about somebody stealing 10 or 11 days from them, depending when they adopted it. Some countries didn't adopt it until like the 1700s, and so they had to add another day to it because of the shift. So they were actually skipping 11 or 12 days, depending. Greece only adopted this calendar in 1923. You think that's less than 100 years ago. So, what is today's date? Well, according to the Gregorian calendar, it's December 23rd, 2018. But the question is, why would I bring this up? Does it really matter? Because with all this shifting, different kings and different stuff, how are you going to actually know what the exact date is today? It's anybody's guess, depending on what frames of reference you're using. And the thing is, does it really matter? No, but most of the world has decided that today is December 23rd. So, to avoid confusion, that is what we call it. Luckily, we don't have to deal with this where we live right here, but let's say close to the Saskatchewan border where they have a time change. You could be living on Saskatchewan time or Alberta time, Lloydminster, right? You have an hour difference. And I think there's even in I don't remember the story 100% correct, but I think it was in Mexico or South America, some Mennonite colony anyway. They decided, well, the time changed. They don't want to, probably Mexico. They didn't want to change the whole hour, so they only moved half an hour. So instead of making it less confusing, they made it even more confusing. It's really silly. The thing that we've got to remember is if it really mattered, God told us in the Bible what day it was. So if you don't want to celebrate Christmas at all, go ahead. Don't celebrate Christmas. If you want to be grumpy, go be grumpy in your own corner. Just don't be grumpy around me. I want to be happy. Christmas is a happy time. Okay, next topic. I think I beat that calendar almost to death. Okay, so the next thing they say is Christmas is spiritual adultery. That sounds like a weird thing. They say Christmas is Catholic. For Bible believers, the name of the winter feast is enough, Christ's Mass. The Mass is a Catholic blasphemy in which they pretend to turn a cracker into God on their altars. Yeah, that part is wicked. I'll keep going before I explain more. They bow, worship, and talk to their cracker before eating it. Then they lock the leftover God in a little house made to keep them safe. The Lord Jesus Christ died once for his elect, and he has never been on the altar of any Catholic church. He is coming soon to vaporize it with the breath of his mouth, and they give a couple of verses there. So their hang-up is the Mass of Christ, that word, Christmas. Well, newsflash, we still use the word Mass today. And it's got a few different definitions. One is how heavy something is. The other thing is mass. You ever hear in the headlines, they're massing troops in Iraq. That means they're gathering them together. Christmas is just a gathering for Christ. Obviously, Catholics did it wrong. They're not even worshiping Christ. But that's what it was. So if you don't want to call it Christmas, whatever. Call it Christ's birthday. If you don't want to worship it, don't. Or if you don't want to celebrate it, don't celebrate it. Whatever you feel like. But I have one question for these people that say Christmas is pagan and Easter is pagan, and all these things are pagan. Is what day is today? Is it Sunday? If you say yeah, my question is, do you worship the sun? Because apparently our weekdays are named after Norse gods. Okay? Sunday was Sol. It was for the goddess of the sun. Monday was for Mani, the goddess of the moon. Tuesday for Tyr. Wednesday for Odin, sometimes known as Woden. For Thursday for Thor. Friday for Frigg. And Saturday didn't come from the Norse, it came from the Vikings, and it came from the ancient Romans, which was Saturn's day. So if you got this big hang-up on calling it Christmas, why are you not causing even more confusion and changing the names of your weeks to different things? And say, I'll meet you on the 4th day of the week, and then somebody's got to figure it out, okay, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Oh, does it start on Sunday? No, it starts, yeah, I think it does, yeah. And then they got to figure it out. Instead of just saying, I'll meet you on Wednesday or meet you on Thursday. Okay, enough on that topic. The next thing that a lot of people have hang-ups is gift exchanges. That we're commercializing Christmas too much. Yeah, that's true. A lot of people are. They're making it all about worldly things, material things. But again, we don't have to throw out Christmas just because some people are overdoing it. So what they're saying is a gift exchange dictated by a calendar is not a message of love, but a ritual obligation. A gift exchange at the winter solstice was invented by pagans to celebrate the sun god. How about you turn to Esther chapter 9. Esther chapter 9. So, they're saying Christianity is giving gifts unexpected without obligation to reciprocate. We're also saying our past lives suffice us for lusts, excess of wine, revelings, and banquetings. Christmas American style is oppression of parents by greedy children. So I agree. Parents need to teach their children not to be covetous and to be satisfied with what they got, that the parents didn't have to get them anything in the first place. I agree with that. There are people that are teaching their children to be too caught up in their things and themselves and to be selfish. I agree with that. But that doesn't mean Christmas is wrong and that giving gifts is wrong. And they say it creates the most foolish, hectic, stressful, guilt-ridden, and unproductive time of year. Whoever wrote this list seems to be a grouch. It just seems that way. So if you're there in Esther chapter 9, let's look at verse 17. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same rested day, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore, the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. So this is Adar, the 12th month. Now, I'm not saying that Adar lines up with December. That's not where I'm going with this. But they're having a happy time. They're getting together. It says they had a day of feasting and sending portions one to another. Okay? So they're sending portions. They're sending presents. They're sending gifts one to another. So I'm not saying that this is telling us to give gifts at present. Or give presents at Christmas. This isn't what I'm saying. But here, this is mentioned in the Bible where people did that, and it does not condemn it. There is nothing wrong with giving your friends or your family presents or gifts if you want to. You drop down to verse 27. It says, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. Okay, so this is not something God commanded them to do, but they were thankful. And backing up in the story, this is where the wicked Haman wanted to kill all the Jews in the kingdom, and God brought deliverance to them through Esther the queen goes and talks to the king, and they could stand up for themselves. And they're so happy that they didn't die. Here they're saying, let's make it so that we do this every year, that these days of Purim, that they're going to get together, they're going to have a happy time, they're going to give gifts to each other. And the Bible does not condemn it, but it actually mentions that part. It wouldn't even have to be mentioned. So if you are a stingy miser that doesn't want to give gifts to your children, go ahead. But don't force it on anybody else. If you're a Nabal, you don't want to spend any money on gifts for your family, go ahead. Nobody is forcing you. But don't complain to me if I do it for my family. That's what I say to these people. Matthew 20, verse 15 says, is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil because I am good? Obviously, this is about a different parable, but I think it applies here. Isn't it lawful for me to do what I want with my own stuff? Is somebody else's eye evil just because I'm trying to do something good? And the next, just because everybody needs, and this is the last point, just because everybody needs a good laugh now and then, I'll throw this one in there. You got a bunch of historical people that were against Christmas. The Pilgrims in 1620, seeking to worship God in truth, formally banned the holiday. The Puritans in 1659, seeking to worship God in truth, set a 5 shillings fine for keeping it. For the 2 centuries following the Pilgrims, Christians in America called it popish. English Parliament under Oliver Cromwell outlawed it in 1644 and punished violators. Okay, because the government's going to ban it, you're saying that's wrong? Someday the government might ban celebrating Christmas or being a Christian here in Canada. I wouldn't do it. We've got a wicked government and it seems to be getting worse. And the Pilgrims and Puritans, I don't think they were even saved. I think they had a work-based religion. I didn't research it. But lastly, and this is one that really gets me cracking, is Charles Spurgeon. So Charles Haddon Spurgeon, this great father of the faith, people say, the most popular Baptist minister of the past, right? He preached against it as late as 1871. Case closed. He said it, we shouldn't do it, right? Well, the thing is, Spurgeon was an unsaved Calvinist heretic that preached a false gospel. And a lot of Baptists, they will fight till their last breath to deny that he wasn't saved. Here's a quote from one of his sermons, just so you know. It says, "Dost thou know that a little sin, if wantingly indulged, will prevent thy salvation?" So he's saying, if you have sin in your life, you wantonly indulge in it, it can prevent your salvation. That doesn't sound like grace through faith to me. So Charles Spurgeon preaching against it would be one of the last things that would convince me that celebrating Christmas is wrong. Because if a false prophet is preaching against it, that doesn't mean that I think it's wrong. You shouldn't even try to get good fruit from a bad tree. You're not going to get it. If you don't want to celebrate Christmas, you don't have to. But go be a grouch by yourself while everybody else is happy. Okay? Let's pray.